Welcome back to Doctors,
Not Doctors, the podcast.
which is in no way to be confused with Doctors Without Borders.
Borders.
Exactly. Very different. Very different. Very rarely do we save lives by traveling abroad.
Or with our academic prowess.
Indeed. Or at all, really. Yeah.
With any medical prowess. Zero
Oh,
medical
yeah.
prowess.
None whatsoever.
No,
yeah.
no.
That's the important thing. We are not doctors. We don't give medical advice. We just talk about politics and try to edutain.
Edutain. I believe you worked on the last edutainment.
Yeah,
and of course, it's not that we're not doctors. We're just not those kind of doctors.
Exactly. And so PhDs, not MDs.
As you will see on the title screen.
Exactly. I, for instance, still believe in miasma theory.
Of course you do.
Yeah.
Which is why he's got so much wood in his bathroom.
Hey.
So this week, on this episode, I should say, there are two things we're going to talk about with you.
Mm-hmm.
The first thing we're going to talk about is just what's been going on this past week, specifically the Trump nominations for his cabinet.
Mm-hmm.
We're not going to go over all of them because all of them haven't gone forward, but I want to talk about a few of them. And none of them give me any cause to think that anything other than the worst is going to happen.
Yeah.
And then after that, we're going to talk about some UK stuff, because last time we talked almost exclusively about what's going on in America. And yes, we're going to start with this one as well with America. But we will also talk about where we live, which is in United Kingdom.
Yeah.
Here in the great smoke in the smoggy London.
Exactly. And we have thoughts about living in the UK and the politics thereof.
Yes, we do. But first, let's get to Trump's cabinet nominations. So, Patrick, I don't know if you've been paying attention to any of this.
I've been trying not to, but it hasn't been working.
Yeah, it's on the news a lot, as you might expect, given that these people will be not only envoys, but in charge of huge portions of the American government.
I mean, just to clarify, when you say large portions of the American government, do you mean, for example, the world's largest bureaucracy that employs millions of people and has a budget in the multiple tens of billions of dollars per year?
Yeah, I think that's what I'm talking about.
Okay then, all right.
Yeah. I'm talking about not somebody who's going to be taking over a small corner shop from their uncle. But somebody will be taking over a large part of the global economy. Yeah.
Hey, that's great. That's all. You know who I really like to put in charge of large portions of the global economy?
Who's that?
People who are allegedly raging drunks.
Allegedly. Our favorite word. Allegedly raging drunks. And also, I don't even think I might have to say allegedly on this, having huge white supremacist tattoos all over his body.
Oh, no, he has huge white supremacist tattoos
we have
all
pictures.
over his
Those
body.
are pictures of that.
Yeah.
Link in the description.
Yeah. Like, seriously, like, on his, what is it, left pec? I'm going to say...
left pec,
Yeah, I think it's his left pec. He's got the Crusader cross, which is not, it's not a common symbol outside of white supremacist circles. So that raises a question.
It raises a few questions. Yeah,
just, one or two.
So I think we need to discuss just briefly here. Obviously, we're talking about Pete Hegseth.
Hegseth. I want to say Hegseth. I want to soften that G, just because I feel like that's...
I feel like he's the kind of guy who likes to use the hard G.
Oh, God, he probably is. Hegseth.
Yeah. So basically, Pete Hegseth is Trump's nominee. PDH. Yeah. PDH is the person who's we're looking for. Trump wants to be the nominee for the Secretary of Defense.
Secretary of Defense.
And do you know his prior qualifications? Because he was in the armed forces.
Yes, he absolutely was. And by armed forces, we mean the National Guard.
That's right.
And by we mean he was a captain for some part of his time in the National Guard. Now, I am not a military expert.
Neither am I.
I have not served. But my understanding is that captains are they're part of the junior officer corps.
Yeah.
So, they're the kind of people who are going to be in charge of, groups of people in the dozens. And that does involve some organizational ability. But then there's the United States Army as a whole.
The armed forces.
The armed forces
as
as
a
a
whole.
Army. You're right, because the Secretary of Defense, that's the Army, that's the Navy, that's the Air Force, and the Marines, and Space Force.
And Space Force, yes.
And the Coast Guard. Can't forget the Coast
No,
Guard.
the Coast Guard's actually, I believe that's under the Homeland Security.
Wait, seriously?
I think so.
Ah, all right.
We'll have to look that up.
Well, thank God for the Coast Guard then.
But I'll have to. We'll check that, and we'll get back to you later in the podcast on if it is or isn't. Mm-hmm. But it's also notable that yes, he was a captain in the National Guard.
Yeah.
Which is the equivalent, I believe, of the TAs here, the Territorial Army.
Yes.
In the United Kingdom.
Exactly.
But he also, and I believe this is the more important part of his qualifications, has been a host on Fox News for quite some time now.
He sure has. He looks good on television.
He does look good on television.
Which is literally the one and only qualification that Trump is concerned with.
Firm jaw.
Yeah. Oh, yeah. Yeah.
Firm jaw.
And so, he likes the cut of his jib. Likes the way the man throws an axe.
In fact, here, if you look him up online, the first thing that pops up isn't former captain in the National Guard, it's American television presenter.
Yeah.
So this is the person that Trump believes should be leading the most powerful military on Earth.
The largest bureaucracy on Earth, with the biggest employer in the United States, I might point out, even more than Walmart.
More than Walmart, yeah.
Yeah,
Absolutely. Yes, more than Walmart.
Yeah.
And so one of the things that he was asked, and I don't believe he gave any answer to, was if Trump ordered him to order the armed forces to shoot protesters, would he say no? And
what did he say? What was
his... The answer, from what I believe, was just nonsense and evasion. And
that fills me with confidence.
So the issue here is that with all of these Trump picks, as you'll see, because we're going to go through one or two more of them, their answers are designed to please Trump, to please the clips on Fox News and other far-right authoritarian media sources. But if you just as a reminder, the person who came before him,
Austin, right?
Lloyd Austin, was, I believe, an admiral. Higher than an admiral. Again, we're not military folk here.
Yeah, but he was in charge of CENTCOM, I think. Central Command.
So his qualifications were exemplary.
Yeah,
and we've typically had exemplary people, even if you don't agree with their politics. They understood the weight of the job of Secretary of Defense.
They had served in the military, or they had served at high levels in the military. General, admiral. At that level, we're talking people who were head of the CIA. We're talking about people who have huge diplomatic experience. Usually, if you're coming into this job, you're coming into it because you are literally one of the most qualified people on the planet to do that job.
Yeah, because of course you're talking about the person who could kill us all.
Yeah.
The wrong choice made. And another question that I was posed to Pete, PDH, as we call him, friend of the pod. Yeah, I doubt that. But he one of the questions that he did, there's a cat floating around. We don't want the cat to disturb the microphone.
Yeah.
But one of the questions that he did ask, was asked, was to name the countries in ASEAN. By Senator Tammy Duckworth of the great state of Illinois.
How well did he do?
Oh, he just said, I'm going to paraphrase here, because again, like Trump, his answer was rambling and without a real beginning or end. But he effectively just said, I know where Korea is, I know where Japan is, I know where China is, and she said,
does he know where ASEAN is?
And he said, and she's like, none of those countries are in ASEAN. You need to know things like this. You need to do your homework before you get to the confirmation hearing. He also refused to meet with any Democrats. So that was the first person that we dealt with. There's a cat on the table now.
Yeah. Okay, Daisy, you're banned from the podcast. That's it.
There are several cats that live in this house.
Yeah, they invaded several days ago, and I've been trying to get rid of them, but I haven't built that border wall.
You haven't built the wall yet.
I haven't built the wall yet, and so once I build the wall, then they won't be able to get in again.
Okay, we're going to move on.
We're going to move on
to other people that were looked at here. We're looking at a lady named Pam Bondi.
Oh, Pam Bondi. She is the ex-attorney general of Florida.
That's right.
My home state.
That's right.
Yeah, one more reason to be just proud, so proud to come from Florida.
Now, and we should also note, for those, this is only the second episode, but Patrick and I both went to Florida State University at the same time, but we didn't know each other. And so I also have ties to Florida, but I left before Pam Bondi became the attorney general, which I think is for everyone, good for everyone. The issue here, though, again, she was asked questions about the cats are everywhere. She was asked questions about what's going on. Basically, what if Trump was to give her an illegal order, or what if Trump was to make her?
Tell her to. What if Trump were to order her to? Basically, abuse her authority in order to go after his political enemies, accuse them of crimes. Yeah. Exactly. And her response to that, I thought, was enlightening. Because her response to that was basically to say, oh, that would simply never happen. And it's and therefore I'm not going to respond to it.
Yeah, she said there will never be an enemies list, quote unquote. There will never be an enemies list. Here's the thing, though: if there was an enemies list, then she could enforce it, and there's nothing you can really do to stop her from creating it and going after political enemies.
Also, Trump did release an enemies list, almost immediately after that happened.
Yeah, there is an enemies list out there.
Yeah, which is kind of great. Like literally put out a whole a truth. Do we call it a truth?
Oh, we call it Trump Thoughts.
Yes.
TrumpThoughts.com.
He did a Trump thought. He laid it out, saying, and do not recommend for my, White House anybody who has ever been, thought of well by, and then literally just list a whole slew of people that he has traditionally considered his enemies, and also called his enemies, and also called traitors, and also suggested should be locked up and or killed, which I think counts as an enemies list.
I think it's a start of an enemies list. I think
that a list of people that are your enemies. I feel like that constitutes an enemies list.
I feel that Kash Patel will have will already have a very comprehensive list in his mind.
Yeah.
There's something else about this. She was also asked about the 14th Amendment.
Oh God.
Now, for those of you who don't know, America has a codified constitution, codified and entrenched constitution, which means it's very difficult to change.
Yes.
And after the Civil War, several amendments,
13th, 14th, and
15th Amendments were added to the Constitution to effectively give rights to former enslaved people.
Exactly.
And one of those rights in the 14th Amendment said if you were born in the United States, you are a citizen.
Well, now, to be perfectly fair and balanced, the text says that anyone who's born and subject to the jurisdiction of the United States is a citizen. And that little phrase there is interesting. What that meant at the time was if you are the child of a diplomat, then you are not, if you're born in the United States, you wouldn't be a citizen at that point.
So an ambassador's kid.
Exactly. The whole idea, of course, being if you're an ambassador, you have extraterritoriality. You are not subject to the laws of the United States. If you murder someone, the United States cannot arrest you, cannot try you. We could just expel you. And this, if you've been following sort of, especially in Britain, actually, you remember there was that situation where an ambassador's wife.
Oh, yeah. It was a diplomat's wife.
Or a diplomat's wife, yeah.
She wasn't the ambassador, and it was from the United States, actually.
Yeah, exactly.
Yeah.
So she was the wife of a diplomat operating in Britain.
Living
in Britain, yeah. And so, anyway, she got into a traffic accident. A young man in Britain was killed. There was no question of her being arrested because she couldn't be, because under diplomatic law, she is not subject to the jurisdiction of the United Kingdom, as she is the immediate family member of a diplomat. So that's the meaning of the idea of not subject to the jurisdiction of a country, meaning the laws have no purchase on you. You cannot be arrested, you cannot be tried, you cannot be convicted. You can simply be removed.
Now, the reason that we're talking about this, and that very specific line, is that doesn't apply to any American who was born in America.
Yeah, absolutely not.
However, the very comprehensive discussion of the 14th Amendment that you just got from Dr. Armshaw here
Thank you.
was longer than what Pam Bondi gave, which was, I'm not familiar with the 14th Amendment. Now, this is very, very important. We know that in order for Trump to start deporting people en masse, he requires the elimination of the concept of birthright citizenship.
Yeah.
And the Attorney General will be the person who will have to defend that policy when it eventually comes up in the courts.
Yeah.
And she is claiming right now that she's never heard of the 14th Amendment, and yet she wants to be the Attorney General of the United States. It's kind of like saying, I've never heard of fish and chips and I want to open a Chippy. I've never heard of a burger patty and I want to open a McDonald's.
Oh, yeah. But what's really funny there is that she's a freaking lawyer. She's a literal lawyer, Chris.
Yeah.
She's an actual lawyer.
Yeah.
She knows about the 14th Amendment.
Yeah.
She's just lying. And I think that is an indication of just what her character is. Because here's the thing, right? If you're a lawyer, you have a duty to the court. You have a duty of candor. You have a duty to protect the rule of law. And I know that people get have a lot of fun making fun of lawyers, and a lawyer is Latin for liar, to quote Arrested Development. But in reality, if you're going to be a lawyer, you are signing up to a certain set of beliefs about how the world works and what law is and what justice is. And when a lawyer breaks that, they can be disbarred. So it's a little bit disturbing to have Pam Bondi, lawyer extraordinaire, suddenly pretend to not know what the 14th Amendment is while under oath.
Yeah, exactly. She is, and that's one of the things that's really important. She is under oath, so she's supposed to be telling the truth, and this entire system works by effectively not lying. And everybody knows that she's lying through her teeth. And this reminds me of another time that we had Republican appointees in front of confirmation hearings when we had the Supreme Court justices, Kavanaugh and others saying, and also Amy Coney Barrett.
Oh, absolutely.
About Roe v. Wade, to which they all said Roe v. Wade is the established law of the land.
It is settled law.
Settled law. That's what they said.
Exactly. And I respect stare decisis, which is the doctrine that says that you don't overturn already decided ideas. So for them to say, A, it's settled law, and B, I respect stare decisis, the only possible implication of that is that they would not vote to overturn Roe v. Wade. When they did. When they absolutely were intending to do so the whole time.
Yeah. It turned around. And so it is another example of the degradation and dissolution of the American conventional system of but there is a punishment that is on the books for this, which we will get to in a different podcast later down the road. Impeachment and removals of the executive and other members of the executive branch. If they lie to your face, which members of the Supreme Court have done to the former Senate, and I believe that Pam Bondi and the rest of Trump's team is going to do in front of the Senate this time. The Senate has the right to kick them out of office because they've lied. And again, in later podcasts, we will discuss why that's completely ineffective now and doesn't really exist. But that's that story for another day. And of course, Marco Rubio also was up on the desk today.
His confirmation hearing, I literally didn't hear anything about. Did he suddenly lunge for a drink of water and look incredibly awkward doing it?
With two hands? No. And again, I'm mentioning him only because I was able to catch a little bit of what he said, and of course, he started blaming a lot of stuff on mass migration and backing ideas like, do we need Greenland? It's like maybe we do.
Oh my God.
So, he's 100% on board to the crazy train. But all of these confirmation hearings are just proof that we are entering into, it's not even uncharted territories. It's dark waters.
Yeah, no, these waters were charted several decades ago, and they didn't go anywhere good.
Yeah. We are not in new waters. We just know the potential outcomes. And we just have to hope that, we can last the 18 months until the next midterm election.
Yeah.
And finally, I think I need to point out, given our last topic in the last pod, we have an answer on how Trump's going to handle the cold in the inauguration.
We do. And the answer is he won't be dealing with it at all.
They'll be running inside.
They'll be doing it inside. Oh, but Chris, what is it that's happened to all the people who got tickets for the mall to stand there for the inauguration?
They got screwed over. They got told to summarily GTF. And all the people who supported him, all the people who put thousands of dollars down to stand outside in the cold for him to listen to his nonsense have been told with no sense of we're sorry, with no sense of let's do something to make life better for you. Go home. Your job is done. I'm in office now, so get ready to get screwed over.
Yeah. I mean, now to be fair,
no.
the Trump people have put it out that they should consider those tickets commemorative.
Yes, that's right, and they will be unique tickets because they will have been used for nothing.
Yep, exactly.
And there are a number of questions that people have. I mean, and immediately on social media, pictures have been popping up of of Obama and I believe Tim Walz and a number of other presidents speaking in the same or colder temperatures.
This is what amazes me. It's the inauguration. It's January in D.C. It's going to be cold. This is not new information.
No.
This is not like a sudden, my God, snow?
It's not even the snow. It is the cold. And, you know, you're from Florida. I'm from Illinois. And so I am familiar with the things that the cold can do. But it's much... Good Lord. A cat just jumped in my lap.
Yeah, sorry. They're rambunctious.
And we're back. So,
can we consider that our first sponsor break, out of curiosity?
That'll be our sponsor break.
Sponsored by our cats.
And a cat just jumped at the table.
Yep. And that's how we know it's time to sell you things.
Yes, one day we will sell you weird things.
I look forward to the day when we can start saying, and now, a word from our sponsors. Meal in a can.
Meal in a
can yourself a meal.
Can yourself a meal. Can you eat the canned meal? Yes, you can.
Ooh, yes, we can.
Oh, what a lovely, lovely idea. One day. But yeah, as I was saying before, and it will end with this, is that obviously people are noting that however many people signed up to go to the inauguration, it was going to be an abysmal, sad, anemic turnout.
And let's be fair, I don't think Donald Trump really... he would have been dressed for the weather. He's a billionaire. He can afford a thick coat. I don't think
and hand warmers. Get hand warmers.
Oh yeah,
he's wearing gloves.
He can afford people to hold his hands to keep them warm if he wants. Like seriously,
they could put battery pack heat packs inside of his giant jacket.
Oh, absolutely.
And I wouldn't even fault him for that because he's an old man.
Yeah, he is. He's an old man, and if he wants to be warm, I mean, not all of us can be Bernie Sanders. You know,
sitting
with the mittens. You know,
with the mittens.
Exactly, being warm with keeping himself warm with his own crustulence, basically. You know,
with his own sense of self-worth, I believe you'll find.
So yeah, not all of us can be as awesome as Bernie Sanders. So I wouldn't have faulted him for that. But the thing is, that's not why he's moving it inside. He's moving it inside because the crowd wasn't going to be big enough.
Yeah, it's clear that the crowd wasn't going to be big enough.
Yeah.
And now, I mean, politically, the smart move is just to prevent that crowd from ever officially turning up, which means anyone who does turn up on the day are just random people, and therefore cannot be counted towards any crowd size.
That's true.
Because I imagine that the people who paid, and there are people who have paid $5,000 for hotels, flights, taking time off of work as well.
Yep. There are real opportunity costs to this.
Yeah, this is I mean, I'm no fan of Trump supporters, but I do feel bad if you took time off of work to go see, the dear leader speak, and then the dear leader told you to fuck right off.
Yeah. I mean, I would feel worse if they shouldn't have known that immediately, that this is a man who has never shown any
respect.
Well, any respect or any sense of gratitude or any sense of reciprocity or anything like that. In fact, his whole thing is being against stuff like that.
Yeah.
Loyalty is a one-way street for this man. So, I don't know. It's like the people who just bought into his new Trump meme coin.
Oh, yeah.
Yeah. So, that's now worth, I think, over $32 billion on paper.
Yeah, just wait for the rug pull on that one, folks.
Oh, my God.
We'll link to what a rug pull is in the description as well, for those of you who are not familiar with Bitcoin or crypto jargon. But we have taken enough time on this. Let's talk about the main thing. So let's take a brief break.
All right.
And then we're going to talk about that in just a second. Okay, and we're back.
We're back.
So, one of the things that you need to know about me right now, so my job...
Full disclosure.
Full disclosure, yes. I work for the Scottish National Party Westminster Group, and I have worked for them since 2009, which means I am directly connected to the next topic, which is the electoral systems that are used in democracies, but more specifically, the most recent UK general election that was taken on July 4th.
And how understanding that electoral system can help explain the results, actually.
That's right. Understanding the current system here will show, kind of the current state of affairs and the potential future and the pitfalls or benefits to the system.
Yeah.
So just before we start down that road, let's give you a little overview of the different kinds of ways to get somebody elected into office. Some of you will know this, some of you won't, so we will try to do this as simply as possible. The first option is called first past the post.
Yeah, if you're from the United States, if you're from the United Kingdom, you know this system, and you know that it has some issues.
It does have issues, and the simplest way to describe first past the post is that the person you have a constituency or district, and there's one person who can be elected from your constituency or district, and if you have two people standing, the person with the most votes win, i.e., the person who got the majority of the votes.
If you've got two people running.
If you have two people running.
Yeah.
As soon as you get more than one person running, you no longer need to attain a majority of votes. You need to attain
You just need a plurality.
The magic word plurality is back.
Exactly. I like to think of it, there's a joke I like to think about, right? That I think helps explain the concept of the plurality this way. Imagine three people are walking through the woods and they come across a bear.
Okay, that sucks.
The bear is big, the bear is angry, the bear is going to attack.
Mm-hmm.
And then, as two of them start to run away, the other one lands down to tie his shoes.
Right.
And the other one say, "What are you doing? There's a bear, you gotta run!" And the third person says, "I don't have to run faster than the bear, I have to run faster than you."
And that's plurality.
Exactly. As long as you get one more vote than everybody else, and than anybody else,
that's right,
you win. So if there's three people, you just need one more vote than a third. If there's four people, you just need one more vote than a fourth, and so on and so forth. So the more parties there are competing for the seat, the easier it is to get elected with a very small plurality.
Right. That's true. And so in simpler terms, think about it like this. If there are two people running and there's 100 people voting, and 51 people vote for person A, and 49 people vote for person B, person A wins.
Exactly.
Add a third person to that.
Ooh.
Now there's a third person.
Yeah.
So if there's 100 people, and 33 people vote for person A, 33 people vote for person B, and 34 people vote for person C.
Well, person C has clinched it.
They've won.
Commanding victory.
With a whopping majority.
That no one has ever seen before, the likes of which has never been seen.
Which is the problem
with
first past the post.
Yeah.
Now, there's people who believe there's a solve to this, and there's two different kinds of solves.
Okay.
So the first one is what the UK flirted with in 2010 and 11, called the alternative vote. Yes. Or some people call it, I believe, ranked choice
You could also call it ranked choice voting. There's a bunch of other names as well. None of them matter because we're just never going to adopt it in this country. The United Kingdom, that is.
Yes, there's no reason to... Sorry, I will get to my opinions later. But AV, the alternative vote, is similar in trying to make sure that one person gets... or one person or party gets a majority.
Yeah, that at least the person who wins has the support of most people in the election.
So it works basically, instead of having two people or three people, you could have as many people as you want stand in a constituency or district where only one person can win. And in order for that person to win, they need to get 50% plus one of the vote.
Yep.
In order for them to get 50% plus one of the vote, the voter ranks their choices. So this is the benefit for the voter. Under first past the post, if I like the leader of a party, but I don't like my local MP, oh, well, I don't know. Well, who do I choose?
It's a good question.
And you only get one choice. Let's say you wanted Keir Starmer to be prime minister, but you didn't like the local Labour MP.
Yeah, you really wanted to vote for the, the Peace and Justice Party, or the,
the Monster Raving Loony
Party. You really wanted to cast your vote for Lord Binface.
Yep.
But you didn't want that vote to go to waste.
Count Binface.
Yes. I'm so sorry. I'm not an expert on the nobility of this.
Yeah, from the French Boniface.
I see.
Yes.
Thank you.
Yes.
Thank you.
Yeah. His it's a long lineage for Count Boniface, Count Binface, as we say.
Exactly. Yeah.
But you wanted to cast your vote for this person on the first past post. You can't. First past post, you have to make a choice. You have to say either it's going to be Count Binface or it's going to be Keir Starmer's Labour Party candidate.
And there's no way to differentiate to anybody else what your vote was supposed to mean. If you vote for Labour because you desperately wanted to turf the Tories out, and the only way to do that was to vote Labour, but you don't really like them, and you would have much preferred to vote for somebody else, it looks exactly the same as if you are a Labour fanatic, do or die, and this was your chance to vote for Labour. Which means that if you're a political party and you're looking at the electoral returns and trying to figure out how much support you have and what people like and what they don't like, you're not getting an awful lot of information from first past the post, are you?
Correct. So alternative vote allows the person in the constituency to vote, to rank their vote. So let's say I want Count Boniface, but I also want the Labour person. I will mark Count Boniface 1, mark the Labour person 2, and then go down the list, ranking them between however many numbers there are.
Yeah.
And then, as the votes come in, the people who get the lowest amount of votes start getting stricken off.
Yep.
Get off the register effectively.
And then their votes go to whatever the second place person was for each of those voters. So
if you were to vote for Boniface and Boniface only got a small percentage of the vote,
Yep.
you've done your job. You voted for Boniface. Now your second choice. Now your vote will go to your second choice person, who will happen to be the Labour person.
Exactly.
Using this process, you can get up to 51% of the vote, or 50% plus one of the vote. Very simply. It's not as simple as first past the post, but it ensures that the person who wins has a majority of the vote.
Yeah.
But there are issues.
There are some issues.
The issue is, for me, the issue is that even though you've cast your vote for Count Boniface or some party that you don't think is going to win, that party gets no benefit from that. And it eventually just filters back into the majority party, the biggest parties.
Well, that's true. I mean, after all, the whole point of alternative voting isn't to get rid of the idea of first past the post. It's just to make sure that the person who gets past the post is the person who at least a majority doesn't hate.
Yeah,
You know?
and that is admirable.
Yeah.
And preferable in some ways to the current system, because at least people could say, all right, well, I guess that's what I want. I guess.
True. And also you've got a situation where the parties at least can tell, okay, we got a lot of votes, we got a lot of seats, but it was all second or third round. So the people who support us, a lot of them aren't really strong supporters. What can we do to make them more happy? What can we do to be first place with them? At the very least, it gives a sense of like, all right, well, say this party, say the Lib Dems, they didn't get a lot of seats, but they had a lot of support. People can then say, all right, well, let's campaign differently next time.
Let's change our policies, or adjust our policies to try to grab in the most people, because we know that we didn't get the largest amount of the vote.
I'm a fan of more information in an electoral system, so I do see a lot of upside to alternative voting.
For as long as we have an electoral system, it's really good that we try to have the best one.
Exactly.
Which leads us to the next system, and the final system that we'll talk about, proportional representation.
Yeah.
And it is not easy to understand for the average person on the street. I don't think it is.
I feel like I'm going to take a crack at this. Can I take a crack at this?
But yeah, go ahead.
All right. So here's my explanation of proportional representation. See, everybody votes.
Woo!
And then whatever proportion of people voted for you, that's the proportion of seats you get.
Whoa, I don't understand that.
Yeah.
I don't understand that.
Yeah. So like if you get a third of the vote, you get a third of the seats.
But how do I get all the seats?
You would have to get all of the vote.
That's crazy. I want to get a third of the vote and get all the seats.
See, that's where proportional representation's no help to you. No help to you at all, I'm afraid. If you want that kind of thing, you really want first past the post. That's your appropriate voting method.
So if I was to use proportional representation, how would I do it in detail here?
So basically, the idea is that you would cast your vote for the party that you like.
Oh.
And then, based on how many votes they got, that's how many seats they'd get.
Oh.
Yeah, it's very, I know, it is the subtleties, the complexities, they're all over the place, really. But, I feel like you could do a lot worse than just sort of saying, yeah, you get a third of the votes, you get a third of the seats, and so on.
And that's the benefit of proportional representation.
Yeah.
The more technical part of it is just quite simply, instead of having one seat in your constituency or district, you'll have maybe 3.
Yeah.
And your district is much bigger.
Yeah.
And there is the risk of the disconnection between the local representation and the person.
Oh, absolutely. In fact, I'm glad that you mentioned this. It really depends on what kind of districts you're talking about. Some multi-member districts could have 3 seats up for grabs. Some can have all of the seats up for grabs, which is interesting. For example, the Netherlands and Israel, both of them have 1 electoral district. It's the country.
Yeah.
And then everyone votes in that district. And the seats in the Knesset in Israel and for whatever the legislature of the Netherlands is called, I haven't checked. That gets divvied up on that basis. So it's pretty great. There are some drawbacks.
Why don't you take me to the drawbacks? Because I really do enjoy proportional representation.
Oh, I love it to pieces, but I am someone who prides himself on a very clear and unbiased view of electoral systems. the good thing about single member districts, first past the post, is that it's a machine for creating majorities. A party's gonna get a majority. Even if they only got a third of the votes, they're gonna get a majority. So I know, right? And you say to yourself, "That's crazy. When would that happen?" And
But let's.
you're right.
I understand the issue that you're talking
I'm moving
about.
a little bit too fast.
You are moving a little bit too fast.
What's the danger with proportional representation?
Yes.
It's basically this. The more seats you have up for grabs in a district, the more parties can run in that district without wasting their votes. And in fact, the rule is, more or less, however many seats are available in the district, it's that number plus one. And that's how many parties are going to be able to contest in that situation. So if you got a single member district, one dude is up for grabs in that particular seat, you're going to have two parties. Because the other ones will simply be wasting votes, there'll be spoilers, and people don't want to vote for spoilers. You have three members in a district, you can expect four parties to be duking it out.
Right.
What if you're, say, Israel, and you've got 120 seats in the Knesset, all of them in the single district that is the country? You would expect 121 parties to be battling it out.
Yes.
And that's one of the reasons why Israel has so many parties. And so does the Netherlands, and so does Belgium, and so does other proportional representation countries. You have way more parties, which means you almost never get a majority for any one party, which means forming a government is always about negotiating a coalition between a lot of parties with some slice of the electorate.
And I wouldn't count that as a negative, though.
Ah, okay.
I don't count having to be consensual as a negative to forming a government, because one country is not a monolith, right? The United Kingdom isn't a labor country.
That
right?
is true.
The United States is not a Republican country, despite
Indeed.
having a lot of the vote, control of all the houses. Yeah. It's very rarely just the one idea. So you do need, like these countries with proportional representation, to force political parties to work together in order to come out with the best option for the people. So so you'll have idea one, idea two, idea three, and maybe all three parties got enough of the vote where them combined makes the best option for the people.
Or at least the only viable option for the people.
Or the only viable option.
There are some ways in which this can go very, very well. There are some ways in which it could go less well. I give you the case of Germany currently.
Right.
In Germany, you have had a coalition government for the last few years, composed of the Social Democratic Party, the Green Party, and the Free Democratic Party. Which is interesting, because the Social Democrats are, center-left. The Greens are, kind of center-left, maybe a little bit more left than that, but environmental. And then the Free Democrats, who are right-wing, and don't agree with their coalition members on anything, and just recently basically blew up the coalition because they refused to countenance the idea of using government money to do things to help the country. Which I'm simplifying massively here, obviously, and don't at me if you're super into German politics. Like, I get it, man. I'm going to bow to your superior wisdom.
We're not giving the deepest of detail. We're using these as examples to describe
exactly
electoral systems.
But that's the thing. You can get coalition governments that are incredibly unstable, and if things don't go well, you can easily have that kind of thing being toppled and new elections being called. And if that happens too often, people tend to get a little bit antsy.
Yeah, and of course, every time there's a new election, there's an opportunity for a different kind of coalition to emerge.
Yeah.
And in Germany, that could possibly be a right-wing coalition.
Oh, I think it's almost certainly going to be
and just depending on what kind of right-wing coalition.
Exactly.
And then my other point that I like to make, just briefly, is something to think about. Even if, and there's a lot of countries that have right-wing coalitions, but they tend to keep out the far right.
Yes.
And even if the far right was getting, 30-ish, 25-30% of the vote, and they came out with the largest amount relative to everybody else, there's still 70% of the country that didn't vote for them.
Exactly.
So in that case, I believe that proportional representation is a boon for democracy, because it forces people to talk to each other. It destroys the idea of dominance in the in the legislative chamber.
It's much harder for a minority of society to be able to seize control of the government.
And that's almost always how it works.
Well, yeah. And the thing is, in a single member district, in first past the post, it is shockingly easy for a relatively small proportion of society to seize total state power.
Which brings us nicely to the United Kingdom.
Indeed. So, Chris, this election that just happened,
Yay.
it resulted in a Labour majority, I think we can say.
Oh, a stonking Labour majority.
Stonking? Would you go so far?
I would go so far as to say a stonking Labour majority.
Well,
huge,
stonking it is. Yep,
huge.
yep. Quite big indeed. They got like, seriously, what, like
over 400 seats out of 650.
Madonna! Yeah, okay, so that's it's dominating, right? And what was the percentage of the vote that they got to achieve this world historical size victory?
34%. 34% of the vote.
Beg your pardon, what?
I will say that again. They got a little over a third of the vote.
A little over a third.
And they got almost all the seats in the House of Commons.
They got about 2/3.
Two-thirds.
So they got 1/3 of the vote, and then 2/3 of the. I feel like one of these things is not like the other.
Yeah, this doesn't balance out, and it is something that I've been studying whilst working in the Commons for years. Because without going into too much detail, the Scottish National Party has been hurt by and benefited from this system. When I started in 2009, we only had 6 members on somewhere around 20-ish, high 20% of the vote. And then in 2015, we got into the 40s, the 30s and the 40% of the vote. We got almost every seat in Scotland.
Yep.
And then in the most recent election, we got about 30-ish% of the vote, and we got only 10 seats out of 50. I'm sorry, 9 seats out of 57 seats. So
that is a really big drop off for a relatively small decrease in the vote, isn't it?
Yeah.
Yeah.
And that happened, and that happened to the Liberal Democrats in 2015, when the exact same thing happened to them.
Yep.
So the system in the United Kingdom is a first past the post system. For those of you who are not aware, the only problem is it's the situation that we described at the very beginning. Instead of having 2 people for 1 seat, you sometimes can have upwards of 10 people. For 1 seat.
Yep.
And just to be clear, it isn't free to run for office in the United Kingdom. It costs £500 to register.
£500 sterling, I might add.
Which used to be a lot of money.
That's true. That's true.
It's still a lot of money around here.
Yeah.
But it costs a lot of money to run for office and to basically have your name on the ballot. And it is a financial barrier to, goofball parties.
Yep.
Trying just to mess with the paper. You could have thousands of people on the electoral paper if you wanted, but I'm not going to put down £500 just for a joke.
No, my jokes aren't that funny.
And and no one's going to get it. And there have been people who have paid hundreds of pounds, YouTubers like Nico, I don't remember his last name, and Max Fosh. He also did it to run for London Mayor. And they did get a percentage of the vote that was, I believe, above the threshold. Oh. If you get above 5% of the vote, you get your deposit back.
Yeah, and so you put down the £500, and if you get enough of the votes, you get the £500 back. Again, my jokes aren't funny enough to make that in any way worthwhile.
Yes, to burn that amount of money consistently.
I'm not getting that money back. I'll never see that money again.
It's true. But there are a lot of people out there who are putting that money down, and every single person that does that dilutes the pool for the 2 main ideologies, with your left wing and your right wing.
Exactly.
Now, in the past, in the United Kingdom, there have been way more left wing parties than there have been right wing parties, viable right wing parties.
Absolutely.
It's mostly been dominated by the Conservative Party, where the left wing parties in the United Kingdom have been Labour, the SNP, the Greens, Plaid Cymru, and that's the Party of Wales, and of course the plethora of Northern Irish parties.
Absolutely. You've got, the Marxist parties that would occasionally, show up for the elections as well. You would have the Monster Raving Loony Party, which is an actual political party, and they have the best name in the history of politics. I'm just going to say it.
Yeah, and they have the best outfits and clothing because they absolutely go nuts. But and like I said, Count Binface, other people like that. So it's not impossible to stand.
And that's kind of the issue, because the more people are running, the more they're taking away votes from their otherwise preferred option. If you're really anti-Labour, then you don't want to have the right-wing vote split between the Tories and Reform. If you're a left-wing voter, you don't want the left-wing vote split between Labour and, say, the Liberal Democrats. Well, I mean, Liberal Democrats are...
It's hard to say. I believe they're more they wouldn't say it out loud. They're probably more center right than they'd like to say out loud.
Yeah, but to be fair, Labor is way more center right than they claim
true.
as well. So
that's true. We need to adjust that probably.
Yeah.
But let's talk about the right real quick. Even though Labor is ostensibly a left-wing party, they are enacting a lot of right-wing policies right now. But the parties of the right in the United Kingdom are the Conservative Party, and then the other viable political party right now, which is not a political party but a business,
that's true,
is called Reform. UK.
Reform UK,
which is led by the CEO, the literal CEO, Nigel Farage. Which
and majority shareholder.
Majority shareholder.
Exactly.
Yes.
It's his property. Like it's not a party, it's his property.
Yes.
Yeah. But what's interesting is that it acts like a party in that it runs on elections, and it acts like a party in that it has basically split the right-wing vote. And this is really new in British politics.
Yes.
Traditionally, the right unites, the left splits. You can even see jokes about this in from the 1970s. The Monty Python and the Holy Grail. There's the People's Popular Front of Judea. Splitters.
The Judean People's Front.
Oh, exactly. Yeah.
And the People's Front of Judea.
Yeah,
and the
entirely
Judean
different.
Front.
Exactly. You know.
And the left is notorious for creating different variations of itself.
Exactly.
Kind of like various Christian churches.
Where everyone wants to be, I'm going to vote for the pure party, the one that perfectly represents my interest. What's that about a two-party system? Noise, I don't care. So normally what happens is that you have conservatives being able to form really powerful majorities with way less than a majority of the vote. Thatcher, for example, when she was dominant, had 44% of the votes, meaning 55% and more of the country voted against the Tories and had no say in what happened whatsoever.
And this is the typical outcome of a UK election. I don't believe there's been a majority victory for quite a while in the UK.
Oh yeah.
And the people who lose because of the way the system is designed in the House of Commons, they just have to watch.
Yeah.
And hope that the governing party, if they do something abhorrent, will basically fall on their own sword and kick themselves out of government.
Yes.
So that brings us back to the most recent election, where the Labour Party
on 34% of
the vote,
34 whole percentage points.
34 percentage points were received effectively a supermajority.
Yeah, one of the largest majorities that certainly the Parliament has seen in recent years. And really just absolutely massive.
But why? But here's the other half of it. Now, you were talking about the right wing and how there was normally just one big right-wing party called the Conservative Party, or the Conservative and Unionist Party. But over the past 10 years, there's been the growth of what we now call Reform, but has been called UKIP.
Yep.
And then Brexit.
Yep.
And now, Reform.
And Reform is currently taking a little bit less than half of the right-wing vote, it seems.
Yes.
Which is the worst possible circumstance if you're a right-wing voter. Because what that means is that you are guaranteeing that you're going to lose seat after seat after seat after seat after seat, even where the right wing has a majority of supporters in that particular seat. And this is actually the reason why Labour is able to do so well. For the first time, you had the right wing split and right down the middle, which is the most impactful split you can have.
Yeah.
At the same time as you had a relatively coalesced left wing that was willing to vote strategically.
In some cases, yes. However, Labour's victory was not as absolute as it looks. There were more Green members of Parliament than ever before, where they went from 1 to 4.
Yep.
And there were more independent candidates who won and beat incumbent Labour candidates. There are 5 of them now, including Jeremy Corbyn, who was the former leader of the Labour Party.
Yep.
Who then stood on his own in his own seat and did what's very, very difficult to do, as we explained before. He ran in his own seat with no support from a big party, and he beat Labour.
Yeah.
And 4 other members beat Labour in I believe northern constituencies.
Yeah.
They were mostly running on the backs of the war in Gaza.
Yeah.
As well. So Labour's victory isn't just because isn't secured because the right has split. Labour's victory is actually tentative because they lost a lot of seats. They lost a lot of votes.
Yep.
And so you have this problem where, and that's how the Liberal Democrats are able to go through the middle, but their majorities are very, very small.
And that's the funny thing. So a massive parliamentary majority on the back of a very small uh, domestic plurality that's built on tiny little majorities in seat after seat after seat. In other words, if there's any kind of change in the winds politically, the next election could, well, destroy Labour in the same way that the Conservatives were just destroyed.
And here's the issue as well, because the United Kingdom is not one giant constituency like other countries we discussed, but they are 650 individual constituencies. We're talking about 650 individual elections.
Yep.
In which you can have an unlimited number of people running for one seat.
Yep.
So you can come up with wildly undemocratic outcomes in various elections across the country that coalesce into the result that we have now. But as I've heard commented on before, Labour's victory is a mile long but an inch deep.
That is, I think, a very good way of describing it.
Yeah. So bringing us back to the concept of the electoral systems, the first past the post system allowed the Labour Party to win 400 seats in the House of Commons, but anywhere else in Europe that just wouldn't have happened.
Yeah.
And across time in the UK, these plurality majorities, if I can use that phrase, have allowed the governments of the time to do, frankly, either damaging things to the economy or just unpopular things, whether they be, invading Iraq.
Well, because if you don't need a majority of the people behind you in order to govern, then you're going to be free to take actions that the majority of people disapprove of.
Yeah.
Which is problematic if you're trying to keep the democratic system respected and, well, functional, really. I do think this is one of the reasons why, and you were just telling me about this earlier, there was a recent poll. Can you tell us about that poll?
Yeah, there was a recent poll, and I don't have all the details. I was just hearing about it from James O'Brien. And the recent poll states that about 20% of millennials, of young people, prefer dictatorship. They believe that a dictatorship would be the best option for a system of governance.
Wow. So millennials are young.
Millennials.
You heard it here, folks. You heard it here.
Yes, for the next few minutes, millennials remain young, but there are a number of people, and I believe this number is pretty constant throughout societies, that believe that democracy may have had its day.
That terrifies me.
That brings us back to the idea of electoral systems, because I would wonder, there's a couple of things that I think about this. I wonder if the same feeling is happening in Germany or Brazil or countries that have recent memory of authoritarianism. Because these young kids, they or not even young kids, just people who just don't have the memory of having their rights stripped away from them and being afraid when they walk out of their door. The stories of East Germany where no one could trust anyone because underneath every table, in every wall, your phone was just all tapped. And if you talk to somebody, you said the wrong thing to the wrong person by accident.
Because anybody can get a benefit from the party by shopping you to them. If I turn you in for your counter-revolutionary sensibilities, I could get your stuff.
That's right.
And so everyone knows that everyone is waiting for everyone else to make a mistake. Because if you do, everyone else can profit from it. And so, and this is actually, in fact, there's a lot of political scientific literature on sort of civil wars and on totalitarian regimes. And in fact, one really interesting idea that I'm going to credit to Hannah Arendt, I'm pretty sure it was her. Again, don't at me, people who are actual experts on this stuff.
We'll confirm this.
Exactly.
And then put in the description.
But so, if I remember correctly, in her Origins of Totalitarianism, she points out that what's interesting about totalitarian systems is not that they seize all power from the people. It's that they distribute power from the center towards people in deeply toxic ways. Specifically, everyone has the power to destroy any of their friends. And the thing about that is that it means that no one can trust anybody. So no one can organize.
That's right.
So no one can oppose the regime.
And that's what I was going to say. It keeps people fighting each other.
Exactly.
As opposed to focusing on what are our leaders doing to us.
Yeah.
And
I mean, that's basically what Hunger Games was about, right?
Well, yeah.
That's the metaphor that she was playing with in that book.
And just completely randomly, while I was doing my doctorate, I met someone from China, and the assignment in one of my classes, I only had 2 to take, but one of my classes was talk to somebody in your class about how their system of government works.
Right.
And I happened to be paired with her and randomly another American. And so I just focused in and I just like, okay, what happens? You know, like how do you get your issues up to the leadership of the country? And her face just went blank. She spoke perfect English, but she just didn't understand the concept of, okay, I'm like, okay, what if you need to, you know, fix a fence over here? Here we would call the council. In America, you'd call, you know, the town or something you know, fix a sidewalk.
You call your buddy who, you know, knows a guy who works with the mayor's office or something like that. You would have formal ways of getting the problem dealt with. You'd have informal ways of getting the problem dealt with. But the idea is that you would be able to get that dealt with.
Your voice would be heard.
Yeah.
And that and that you have a stake in society.
Yeah.
And it was very difficult for her to explain the basics that we take for granted, which is another reason why I believe, you know, young people are willing to say, you know, okay, whatever, dictatorship's not going to be any different than this. It doesn't mean anything's going to get better for you. But I don't think they have both the educational knowledge of what's happened or the mental knowledge of what's happened.
Yeah.
Countries that have had dictatorships have stronger electoral rules to prevent them from happening again. Germany, for example, no individual member of the Bundestag can table any piece of legislation. They need to have the backing of 5% of the Bundestag or or a political party, which will obviously be more than 5% or at least 5%.
Yeah.
Brazil, as I was saying not on the pod, but I've said it before, is that members of the executive, when requested to give information to the Senado or the Câmara dos Deputados, they have to give the information within 30 days or be impeached. It's in the Constitution.
That's pretty sweet.
So they
I like that.
And I've spoken with people who basically they spend like the executive spends all their time just trying to extend that deadline because it's a hard deadline that they have to work for. Right. Even in America, we don't have a system that's adapted for authoritarianism yet, but we do have a system where the Congress controls the executive. The fear was a powerful executive, as you had in England, as it was, right? So even in America, we still do have the safeguards. It's whether or not you actually activate them.
Well, we can talk about that. And I think one thing that we may want to talk about in a future episode is how you can go about using party politics to sort of get around constitutional safeguards, get around separations of power. Because after all, you can separate the executive from the judiciary from the legislature all you want, but if a single party controls all three and agrees to act with its party interests in mind first and foremost, then effectively there is no separation of power. In fact, that's kind of what the Nazis did when they took over power in Germany. They substituted the party apparatus for the state apparatus. Same thing with the Soviets and sort of communist parties more broadly. But to bring us sort of back home, you were mentioning at the very beginning, these many years ago on this podcast, that all the people who had spent thousands of dollars to come and support Donald Trump during his inauguration and finding themselves out in the cold, quite literally.
Yes, quite literally.
Donald Trump doesn't need them anymore.
That's correct.
And that's, I think, what the 20% of young people who are sort of fine with democracy disappearing don't understand. It's that without democracy, they don't need us. And if they don't need us, we are in trouble.
Yeah. A lot of people have grown up with, and I'll use this as an example, the anti-vaxxers.
Yeah.
People who believe that there's no need to vaccinate your children because there's nothing out there that can hurt them, and that our immune systems are strong enough to fight off everything.
Yeah, exactly.
No matter what it be, whether it be, the flu, cold, COVID.
Well, that's why the Black Plague was such a dawdle. Like famously, nothing happened during the Black Plague.
Yes, exactly. Yeah. And the reason why people are able to have these frankly absurd opinions and beliefs is because, and as many people who deal with this thing professionally will say, is that we haven't seen the measles in the same way, or typhoid, or the Black Plague. They still exist. Almost all these things still exist. Smallpox, is that still around?
No, they eradicated it.
Smallpox
has been eradicated. But it's, they keep vials around just in case it comes back so they can make more vaccine.
And
you know,
and because we've not seen these things, and people haven't lived with the terrors of it, and you know, people have this, like, again, another saying is that, somebody might say, I don't need any, vaccines because, what did our ancestors do before vaccines? And we just said they died.
Yeah.
There's tons of small graves all over the world
Oh my
of
God.
kids who died from childhood diseases.
Like, seriously, go to your local cemetery and look at the graves and the ages of the people who are buried there. And what you will find is that before, say, the 1960s,
yeah,
just so many child graves, just tons and tons of them. Little babies dying all the time.
And it shows in that small amount of time, from let's say the 1960s to today, which is only, it was for me,
Yeah.
I was born in the 80s, but it shows how short it takes from a global issue to now fiction.
Yep.
Which is probably where these kids are coming from.
Yeah.
They've never grown up with the threat or the fear.
Yeah.
Like we did with the Cold War.
Yeah.
Like our parents did with the Cold War and World War II.
Yep.
There hasn't been a great global fear of authoritarianism in this generation that we've all had in the past.
The inoculation has worn off.
The inoculation has worn off because in some ways it's worked.
Yeah.
But in other ways, it's just kept the virus at bay in certain countries that we just haven't been paying attention to.
Yep.
But those countries have been awake, and they've been spreading the virus across.
They sure have.
And if you've got PR in your system, then you'll be able to fight it off a little bit better. But if you have, let's say, a first past post system and an electoral college,
and say one of those political parties gets infected with the virus, well, then all of a sudden you're in a situation where a very small minority can seize total state power. And you find yourself,
where we are today.
Yeah.
Potentially. Who knows?
Yeah.
The future is unwritten, as they say.
Yep.
And so, as always, register to vote while you still can. Take all advantage of the benefits that democracy has granted you.
Yep.
And,
and here's some actual medical advice. Wash your hands and get your vaccinations in.
Hey, listen. That's just some good advice. Not medical advice, but good advice. Right, so that's the end of the podcast for us. Thanks for listening. Oh, we finish each other's sentences.
I know, and sandwiches.
They're delicious sandwiches.
Yeah.
Well, until next time, I'm Dr. Silverstein.
I'm Dr. Armshaw.
We're doctors,
not doctors.